Dawn never came to Road Harbor that morning, only a sour yellow glow behind roiling cloud. Barometers had been sinking all night. The glass on the harbor master's desk fell past numbers he had never seen. Wind shifted in fits, pouring from one quarter and then another, as if the compass had broken. At anchor lay a black-hulled Royal Mail steamship, iron plates tight riveted, and decks scrubbed for a passage that would not happen. Her name was RMS Rhone. Crewmen had lashed boats and sent down extra chain. Passengers kept to the saloon, listening to crockery chatter in the cupboards and the long whine that comes before a gale like a breath drawn through teeth. The first hard gusts tore shingles from the customs house. The harbor became chop, then confetti. By mid-morning, moorings began to part like string. Rhone had made this run often, St. Thomas, Tortola, onward through the Lesser Antilles, mail locked in the strong room, cargo snug in the forward hold, saloon lamps swinging over mahogany tables. She had both a single screw for steam and a spread of spars for sail, and the company trusted her with schedules that bound colonies together. The West Indies in October carried their own calendar: warm seas, sudden violence. The storm that bore down would later be called the San Narciso hurricane. No one on the bridge needed a saint's day to name it. They only needed the pressure falling and the smell of rain like iron. 2 ships rode the crowded harbor that morning, Rhone and another packet. As the wind backed and strengthened, both captains reached the same decision almost at once. To ride out a major hurricane inside a bowl of mountains is to risk being dashed against the quay when anchors drag. Better to make the open sea, put the bow into it, and use the engine to hold a heading while the worst passes. Signals went up. Engine room hands checked bearings and steam. On deck, crew moved with knives, cutting away awnings, freeing running rigging, clearing anything that could turn to a club. Passengers were told to remain below until the ships were clear of the harbor, and the captain gave word. Getting clear required threading a channel between Peter Island and Salt Island, a fairway every mate knew in daylight and fair weather. Today the sky was green-black, and visibility fell in sheets. Waves wrapped around the headlands, meeting in peaks that collapsed across the channel like a moving wall. Rhone's anchor came up caked in weed. The engine took a steady beat. She gathered way, following the other packet through the mouth of the harbor, then turned toward the channel that promised deep water and, beyond it, survival. The wind had other plans. It swung with the storm's eye and drove a short, savage sea across the channel at an angle that pushed both ships toward the lee shore. The first packet scraped through with room to spare and staggered into open water. Rhone, larger and deeper, needed a wider arc. On the bridge, the captain studied the waves breaking white against a black tooth of rock that locals called Black Rock at the tip of Salt Island. Charts warned of it. So did every boatman. Under normal seas, it was bad enough. In hurricane seas, it was a hammer. For a moment it seemed the ship would clear. Then a set of cross seas lifted the bow and twisted the stern sideways. The screw chewed air. The rudder lost bite. The current took her and pressed her across the rocks near the point. Iron shrieked like a living thing. The hull opened under the stress with a sound deep as a groan. Cold green water shot upward through a new seam and rushed forward along the lower deck. In the engine room, men saw the water and what it meant. If the flood reached the red-hot boilers, steam would flash to shock and steel would let go. Passengers had been told to stay put, a standard order in heavy weather when the danger on deck is obvious, and the safer course is to keep people low and inside. Some buckled themselves into bunks or wrapped arms around bedposts. Others pushed toward the companionway when the first blow landed. Crew tried to hold the stair. The second blow broke argument. The ship struck again, forward this time, almost on a line with the mailroom. With the hull breached and the bow pinned, the stern swung with the sea. The boiler let go a few heartbeats later, a punch no one mistook for thunder. Heat, iron, and steam tore through the center of the ship. Light fell from the saloon lamps like coins sliding from a table. In the chaos that followed, Rhone came apart. The bow section remained wedged near the rocks off Salt Island. The stern, with its massive bronze propeller, swung free and sank in deeper water. Men were thrown into a boiling slick of debris, timbers, hatch covers, sections of rail, trunks, and the sudden flotsam of a ship's private life. Some surfaced beside their shipmates and tried to shout orders that wind shredded. Others went under in a lace of bubbles and did not return. A handful reached the rocks and clung there with fingers torn and feet bleeding, pressed flat each time a wave lifted and fell. The hurricane went on, indifferent, combing white water across black stone, taking what it wanted and leaving wreckage where it pleased. Toward evening, the worst passed, and the sky opened a cracked eye to the west. Villagers from Salt Island and nearby Tortola came out in boats the moment the tide eased enough to risk it. They found timbers sawed clean by barnacled rock. They found lifebelts and a hatch with a brass number. They found passengers who had made it to shore shivering hard enough to chip teeth, and crewmen who could only point toward the reef and the wash that still boiled over it. They also found the first bodies, turned in from the channel and delivered to the rack line, as if the sea kept a certain courtesy even in violence. They laid the dead in a row above the high water mark and spoke names when they could find a document or a shipmate who knew a face. In the days that followed, colonial officials took statements as precisely as they could, noting the hour the wind swung, the moment the engine slipped, where the hull first struck, and what was seen of the explosion. Islanders took on another job that does not fit cleanly into a report. They gathered the last effects of the lost, a ring still tight on a finger, a watch stopped at the minute when water reached it, a locket with a face inside, a mailbag intact enough to hand onward. They dug graves on Salt Island's slope and set crosses. The numbers told a blunt story. More than 100 souls gone in a single hour, crew and passengers together, a few dozen saved by timing, strength, or luck. The wreck lay in two great pieces, one shallow and one deep, separated by a fall line of coral and sand. Over years, the sea rewrote Rhone in language it understands. Coral colonized iron. Parrotfish chewed the edges of plates. Big groupers learned the shade of the stern frame. Divers who found her in the 20th century reported sights that make even practical men quiet. The propeller standing like a sculpture in green light. Companionways you can swim through with a torch and a calm mind. The ship's bell, heavy with salt, that locals say rings in certain storms when swells reach the right pitch and pressure. Some call it superstition. Others have heard a note underwater that they cannot explain and do not try to. Stories grew where loss had left gaps. Some said passengers were strapped to their bunks as a precaution, and that straps kept them from reaching the ladders, a detail retold because it carries a cruel logic, though records from survivors are spare. Some said the captain's last view was of black rock rising like an anvil in a green furnace. That much every chart supports. All the claims fold back to what can be verified on the bottom. There is the sundered bow where it struck. There are handrails twisted like soft wire. There is evidence of a blast where the boilers sat. The rest belongs to the air above the reef, where wind has a memory and people will always supply one if the sea does not. Today Rhone lies inside a protected marine park off Salt Island, a place marked on maps and in the logbooks of charters out of the British Virgin Islands. Guides brief divers with the care you give to history. Watch your buoyancy. Respect the coral. Take nothing. They point out the massive wrenches still clipped to a workbench by rust, the porthole that divers touch for luck, the place where mail once sat behind a door that no longer exists. The stern is the deeper draw, the iron frame arching like a rib cage over sand where turtles graze. The bow, nearer the surge, reminds visitors that this is not a museum. Surge breathes in and out through open plates. Fish hang in the current and then turn as one body. Stand on Salt Island above the point where black rock breaks the water and the lines come clear. The channel narrows exactly where desperation forced a choice: run for the open sea or trust an anchorage that would not hold. On a calm day, the water there looks almost lazy, as if it has forgotten. In the next storm, men on boats still listen to the notes in the rigging and the iron. Some say they hear something else when the swell is long and the wind leans from the east, a tone under the weather, heavy and patient, like a bell rung for names no one alive can recite from memory. Shipwrecks become places because memory anchors to iron. Mail routes that stitched far islands to courts in London end here in a split hull and coral heads. A steamship designed to cheat distance met the one thing seamanship cannot outrun: a narrow choice amid rock and wind. The evidence remains under a few fathoms, visited daily by people who leave bubbles and carry away only the quiet that follows a long look. It is not a ghost story to say the wreck speaks. It is a record. You can read it with your hands. Thank you for listening to the Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.